Welcome to the All Things Circular podcast, your gateway to the circular economy. Hosted by industry experts Victoria D'Arcy and Rich Bulger. Every episode is proof that circularity isn't just good for the planet. It's a smart business decision. Our mission is simple: to empower, to inform, and to show you how to make the circular economy work for you.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of All Things Circular. I'm Rich Bulger here with my good friend,
Vic D'arcy.
and we are going to go through and spend some time today getting into data intelligence reporting. We've brought with us a remarkable person in the space who's done a ton of research, and we get to go through and pick his brain and get up to speed with all things circular related to what company best practices are through empirical research. So I'd like to introduce Ben Caddy from Canalys. Ben, welcome to All Things Circular. Give us a little bit of background about you and Canalys and what you specialize in.
Sure. So thanks very much, Rich, and thanks, Victoria. It's really good to be on the show. I've watched a few episodes, and yeah, awesome to be here. So I'm a senior analyst at Canalys. We're now part of Omdia, and essentially what Canalys is, we are a market research firm. Analyst firm. We are focused on the role of the IT channel. That's kind of our unique focus, and that basically means looking at all of the companies in between the vendor and the end customer. So 70% of IT products and services go through the channel, and as you can imagine, there's a huge part that the channel partners have to play in sustainability as well, especially in terms of the kind of circular economy services. So my research covers all topics of sustainability. But circular economy is a real passion and focus area for me, and it's also a real focus area for the channel partners and for vendors as well to an extent. So, really great to be on the show.
It's quite interesting where you guys sit, actually, because you're very much focused on that lens through the partner view. And I think it's quite interesting because depending upon where you are in the ecosystem, in the supply chain, you can have a different view. Because your priorities are different, your drivers are different, your responsibilities are different. And what's interesting about the partner view is they are really balancing the needs and desires of the vendors, so their suppliers, via the distributors, but then the needs, desires, and demands of the customer. So are you seeing sort of changes within the partners in terms of their approach to, the purchase of IT assets, whether they're looking at more things like design, whether they're looking at reuse, whether they're looking more at now circularity? Where does that partner currently? What are those desires and what are the pressure points sitting at the partner level?
Sure. So partners play an incredibly crucial role in the IT industry, and vendors increasingly they are relying on channel partners to get that equipment out to the market. So channel partners are ultimately, there's multiple different kind of forms we can talk about. Obviously, you mentioned distribution, but there's resellers, there's managed service providers, systems integrators. Essentially, these are the companies that are kind of working as advisors and kind of connecting the dots between the vendors and the customers. So often what happens is, a channel partner is the one who's going to help the customer understand their IT needs and, what the best solution might be. And increasingly, we're seeing those channel partners, they have to be the people who can talk sustainability to customers. Obviously, many of those channel partners care about sustainability themselves. Like many companies, they have their own net zero goals, they have their own, CSRD compliance, all of their reporting, but often customers do as well. So channel partners they're really the companies that have to explain and help customers procure IT in a sustainable way. So as you mentioned, Vic, and we're on the All Things Circular podcast, so a big part of it is circularity. This is an area where channel partners really can make a big difference, especially on the hardware side. So so as I said earlier, 70% of IT globally goes in a B2B sense, goes through the IT channel. So partners have a huge role to play in obviously helping the customer procure that equipment, and that's kind of where there's an opportunity to get more refurbished and remanufactured tech out to the customer. And partners also have a role in kind of, you mentioned the design phase. Partners have a role in kind of repairing devices, making sure that they're working for customers and extending the lifespan of those devices. And also, partners are really capable of actually getting the equipment back as well. So getting the equipment back to refurbish or to recycle if there's not any value, and if a product has been kind of exhausted of its value at the end of its life cycle. So, and one trend I'd really say there is that partners are really investing in circularity. Everyone knows it's a tough year for sustainability, and let alone ESG. But we really do hear a lot of confidence from the IT channel in terms of circularity. It's really an area of momentum where they are investing. Partners are making a lot of money from this as well. There's a huge opportunity here, and there's demand for customers as well. I think in terms of some of the sort of pain points, though, there is a kind of wider business model challenge, and I think obviously vendors are the ones who are designing the products, and often channel partners are the ones who are getting out to the customer. And there's some kind of challenges where partners are really capable of kind of doing all these circular services. They can resell refurbished hardware. We're increasingly seeing some channel partners actually able to refurbish hardware themselves, and vendors are starting to wake up to that. But one of the big challenges there is there's kind of a wider lack of incentivization for channel salespeople to be pushing refurbished hardware or remanufactured hardware over brand new. So that is kind of a real challenge because partners are so capable of doing this, and often some of the big channel partners globally, and it's not just a European play. It's true in North America, it's true in South America, and increasingly growing in APAC as well. Channel partners are really capable of handling those circular services, but there's not really much of a incentive from the vendors. The channel partners are incentivized to sell new products, and that really holds back the growth of the circular economy in the B2B space.
Having been burnt by this for many a year, actually, as people know, I spent nigh on 20 years at Cisco, and we saw a few things happening that was not necessarily intentional, and certainly as sort of time's gone by, less intentional, perhaps maybe a few years ago, where very much what you're saying, the incentive to sell new products was huge, particularly if it's a new product launch, etc. And actually remanufactured or refurbished, as it was first known, was seen as kind of the poor cousin. It was seen as the relation that you didn't really want, and if there were no other choices, yes, I'll take it. And that narrative has flipped on its head. But the sales processes and the sales strategies have not. They have remained strategies that enforce a linear economy, because again, the vendor wants to sell a new product because they don't necessarily value as much that product to its second customer. And it's a complete misnomer, because by relicensing it, that costs the vendor no money in relative terms. And so by relicensing a piece of hardware that you've already put all of your energy into, in the mining of it, the creating of it, the manufacturing of it, the shipping of it, relicensing it and sending it on to that second customer is really, really margin rich. Number one, you are then reinforcing the good behaviors of circularity. You are helping all of those wonderful metrics that you spoke about. But what I found really, really interesting is when you're trying to sell it into a large vendor across teams, one of the biggest challenges you come across is, well, it's cheap. It means I've got to sell twice as much to hit my target. So when you go back into incentive, you really have to work very hard to persuade the salespeople to even consider it based on this, misconception that, because it's so cheap, I've got to, sell more products, which just doesn't work like that. But the second piece that I saw, and this is where it really wasn't intentional, this is just the laws of large companies, is when product spiffs would be run, promotions would be run, discounts would be run. And generally, certainly this is what I saw, is they'd be run on the new product. They wouldn't run them on the remanufactured or refurbished version, which then meant in most cases the remanufactured became more expensive than the new product because it was on promo. So again, it's that linkage, it's that left hand to the right hand. And the final thing I'll say on this, and again, it comes down into incentive, but this time from the customer, is because when you're looking at support for these products, if the support remains the same price that it did for the new product, and you haven't actually an applicable price point against the support, against the hardware that is, 20 to 30% cheaper than new, it skews the viewpoint, right? So because the support's really expensive. So again, it disincentivizes them to actually buy that remanufactured hardware. So like I was saying, I just wanted to jump in there, Rich, because I've seen this and I've been burnt by it. And, for me, there's some really small tactics that can be used. Margin is a way to pay sellers that is beneficial to the company, and that would actually flip the remanufactured sales to being more desirable because they're margin rich, particularly when organizations are looking at those recurring revenues like licenses, service, and support. That's the first one. And the second one is, going back to the good of incentive, the spiffs. Don't run it on one side and not the other. But actually, if you incentivize your sellers from the vendor to the disty to the partner, like the good old days. I remember I went on a snowboarding trip from Nortel Networks. I'm that old. But, the tactics there, the incentives are there to drive the behaviors because, as we said, the demand is there.
Yeah, Ben, one of my former lives, I actually started Verizon's mobile trade-in program back in 2010 when everyone thought it was a crazy idea to buy a device back. But in my Army truck driver brain, I thought if I could go through, buy something back that has value, apply that value towards the next thing that you want to buy, I could sell more things. And then what happened was when we took those devices that people no longer wanted, after we let them go through and apply that credit, I was able to sell it for more than what I bought it for. And those devices started firing back up on the network. So it introduced a new revenue stream. And at the time, we had 47 different colors of Bluetooth speakers, light bulbs that changed colors, any fitness accessory you could want on the planet. And qualifying a customer and asking all the questions to go through and get them to the right product took a lot of time. But with one question, what are you doing with your old thing? I was able to go through and get an asset back that had value. By the time I left Verizon, the revenue from selling things that people no longer wanted exceeded the revenue from every accessory sale we had through every channel combined. And the funny thing about this, and Vic is going to kind of go to your point, is if you look right now, I spent half my life on commission sales. The only revenue generating activity that our sales team was not commissioned on was taking back someone's used device and asking that one question. And what the power would be if they were incentivized to go through, get the old thing back so it could be sold again to sell products and services and different things, is one of the biggest misses I think I see in business. But Ben, let's get back to you and Canalys. You're doing a ton of research. We have a college. There's one college on the planet that I found that has a bachelor's and a master's program in reverse logistics. So we have some students that come on to go here. One of our missions is advocacy and learning. And I'm often pinged with some of those students saying, hey, where can I go through and learn? What are the industry trends? So if you wanted to go through and help someone with a good weekly assignment, you've published a ton of reporting and a ton of industry thought leadership. Talk to us about the recent paper that you all wrote. What are you seeing and how can people learn more? Where would you like to direct people to say, hey, you should really pay attention to this? I'm handing you a magnifying glass.
Sure. Wow. So I think in terms of some of the recent research that Canalys has published, so right now is an exciting time for us because we're in the process of running our 2025 Sustainable Ecosystem Survey. And we run the survey every year. And it's basically a really broad sample of channel partners globally, hundreds of channel partners globally, to ask them probably about 20 questions on what sustainability means for their business, what holds them back, what the opportunities are. And we had some really interesting findings when we ran it in 2024. So one of the big key points that came out last year is 50% of channel partners said that they were making some money from sustainability, which is a really important point. I think right now, if you're working in sustainability or if you're in the process of trying to get into the sustainability world, let's say you're doing one of those awesome circular economy and reverse logistics degrees, you might feel a bit sort of discouraged when you talk sustainability and ESG, and it's that can be a bit of a mess to talk about politically right now. But we found that 50% of channel partners are making money from sustainability. Big part of that is circular economy. There's obviously so many other services that partners can provide, such as kind of consulting services or like green ops services for optimizing cloud environments, all sorts of kind of consulting and advisory type roles they can have. But channel partners really are so capable of handling, reverse logistics as well. So I think one thing I would say is in this very broad sort of IT ecosystem, don't just focus on what vendors are saying. Speak to some of the channel partners and see what they're doing, because they really are so capable of connecting the dots between the vendor and the customer. And I think in terms of some of the recent research that we're seeing, obviously, things have changed a bit in the last 12 months on sustainability. Companies are talking about it in a different way. We're seeing the language around sustainability and ESG kind of shift. I think there's sometimes a lot of hype in the media of a big, sustainability is dead kind of message. I think that's completely not true, especially when we come to the channel, and some of our kind of early results of our survey are proving that. So that's one of the key sort of areas that we're talking about recently. And there's a couple of interesting reports that we've got out at the moment.
Actually, before you get into that, I want to lean in
Yeah.
a little bit to one of the things that you said about changing vernacular, because we've been trying to go through and adopt and advocate. I like using the term circular logistics instead of forward logistics and reverse logistics, because forward is moving to the point of use, reverse is moving away, and circular is a process of moving product from the hands of the first customer into the hands of the next customer. And there's a thought process on how you do it. There's also a circular sales approach, where you mentioned the way that I've heard it expressed. You have a maker of things, a brand, a vendor, I think is the terminology that you used, a distributor of things, which is what a partner is. Someone that goes through and buys different things from different brands to match it to the end customer, make, distribute, sell. But what you find is with distributors that have customers saying, well, what do I do with my old thing? Because they're having that conversation when they're putting in the next new thing. Distributors or partners are encountering the fact that they don't want to tell customers, no, we can't help you. They want to find ways to say yes, and they're doing it in ways that extract value. So for me, the 50% statistic of partners going through and finding ways to go through and make money off of things that people no longer want means they're identifying the market for customer two, engaging in circular sales, where they're identifying, hey, this person might not need a brand new, fully functional thing. A 3-year-old thing with a couple scratches on it at a lower price point still has value, and I can use that value to help sell more new things. So one of my favorite words that I've been trying to go through and leverage, because I find they resonate, is circular sales, being programs like trade-in, product as a service, lease, and circular logistics as for successful movement from and to, and you can match the success by how many times a product goes from the hands of one user to the next. So I'm interested in the work that you're doing about how the vernacular and terminology are changing. But let's get back into the reports that you've been compiling.
Sure, yeah. And I think just to touch on some of the things you said there, Rich, I mean, I think, the vernacular and the language is, talking sustainability overall, that's changing a lot. And companies are they're not necessarily, backtracking on sustainability. I think there's some big public examples. And if we're talking ESG, there's a big hesitancy to use that language. But I think circular economy, economy is in the word. And I think that's a really fundamental, if obvious, point to stress. It is a business model. And obviously, we are currently, our industry and our society is built on a sort of, sell new products, make, use, dispose kind of business model. But circular economy is clearly an area for opportunity. And we really see, as I said, 50% of channel partners make money off sustainability in some way. I'd say a majority of that is actually going to be circular economy services. And to your point, Rich, there's so many instances where channel partners and distributors especially are the ones that are responsible for getting that new equipment, or maybe refurbished equipment, that'd be nice, out to the customer. But they're also in that capability. They are so close to the customer, they're also quite capable of taking it back. And we see that the survey we did last year, we'll have some fresh stats on this pretty soon. We found that I think it was about 66% of channel partners offer some form of take back service. And the way that they do that, it might vary. So some will kind of just resell a vendor's take back service. That's kind of something that vendors are trying to push right now. And also some partners they'll use an ITAD for it, so they'll outsource it to an ITAD that they trust. But what's been really interesting is we are seeing channel partners themselves, and these are companies that their business model has not always been circular. Their business model has been, moving IT products around, getting them to the customer, and working with the vendor on that. But we're really seeing that some of these channel partners they see such a clear business opportunity in this that they are kind of moving into the circular market and becoming players to kind of rival some of the ITADs out there.
They're buying companies, aren't they? Some of the channel partners are buying ITADs and becoming ITADs, and then having both sort of sides of that scale, that sell of the new, but that pull through and sell to the second customer. And I think it's really, really interesting, Ben, because I want to kind of just go back 10 seconds when you said some partners are selling vendors take back programs, and that's the strategy that we're seeing. What I want to do is I want to pull the cover back on what are those take back programs, what sits behind them. Because as we know, it's really easy to come out of this market with a marquee statement, whether it be around recycle, whether it be around reuse. But what I'm not seeing is anybody actually put some real figures behind what those marquee statements say. Because in my mindset right now, and please tell me if I'm wrong, but in my mindset right now is that the vendors are still very much valued on a linear model. How many new products did you sell? How many new boxes did you sell? How many new licenses did you sell? And whilst they're valued in that, it's not necessarily in their interest, or not that they see that it's in their interest to put products onto a second use cycle or a third use cycle. However, there is demand from the market and there is demand from the partners, and we're seeing partners bend and shift into becoming machines that can actually service both. So is there a gulf, is there a gap between what you're seeing at the vendor level in terms of activity and what really happens behind those grand statements to actually, this is the reason why the partners have moved into this area, because the vendors aren't doing it and the partners are therefore doing it for them?
So I think there's some really interesting nuance to get into here in terms of who's doing the asset recovery and what that looks like. So I think with vendors, generally speaking, they're obviously very, very protective over their equipment, and they really, really do not want their equipment falling into the wrong hands. Obviously, that can be more of a liability for a customer, but they don't want to be involved in that. They don't want to have to deal with that. So that's why we often have seen, vendors kind of pushing their own asset recovery services that they can, that are entirely done by them. So they will sort of offer an end-to-end service, and for a partner, that's quite an easy way of, being able to tick the box and deliver some sort of asset recovery service to that customer. And, the customer often can be, quite confident in that because it's done by the vendor end-to-end. I think one of the interesting nuances there is obviously partners see that they can make quite a lot of money from take-back services, and especially when you're talking about some of the partners that can actually not only take back the equipment, but able to refurbish it themselves. So, you mentioned, Vic, some of the partners are buying ITADs, and there have been some really interesting stories in the past few years of, companies such as, let's say, Computer Center and Varnia, TD Synnex, companies like this, buying ITADs and really investing in that capability in-house. So that's been a really interesting area where they can see a business model there. And I think there's a little bit hesitancy from vendors to kind of recognize the role that partners are playing there. But I think there is a slight kind of sea change underway. So partners are obviously really investing in their circular services, their capabilities there. And, I'm talking about channel partners here, not necessarily ITADs. And obviously, some of those channel partners kind of work as ITADs now. But we're sort of seeing that.
Or they're buying them to augment their portfolio.
Exactly. Some companies, it's just easier just to acquire that. They see the demand for these circular services, for recycling, repair, refurbishment. They see the demand. And often as part of their kind of, global sort of geographical expansion plans, it just makes sense to buy an ITAD. That market is really booming. So lots of merger and acquisition activity there. So that's really an area, but we're seeing a gradual kind of recognition from vendors, and it's not materialized into a ton of results yet, but we're definitely seeing that kind of sea change where vendors are starting to recognize that their channel partners, and we're not talking ITADs, they're channel partners, which are companies they've trusted for decades. They're some of their major IT resellers, IT distributors, are actually able to do all these things themselves. And
Good.
it is. It's a gradual process, and I think I know there's a lot of vendors working on this type of thing right now. Some interesting pilots going around. The only thing that's really like kind of publicly announced, I would point to what HP is doing actually. So they've got something out at the moment, which is their certified refurbished licensing program. And essentially the way that works is, HP does its certified refurbished products, which you can buy directly, and channel partners can resell that. But they've also got a program where very select, they're very careful about who handles their products. They're very careful about the facilities of any sort of ITAD, but they've made a few kind of announcements of companies, especially, mainly ITADs, that they're trusting to, not only take back HP equipment, actually refurbish it and produce HP certified refurbished products with the exact same branding, the exact same warranty, the exact same replacement parts as a product that HP would refurbish itself. So that's been a really interesting development, and there's some big companies that will know of there. So like Foxway, for instance, a major player in the circular market. But what's been really interesting in the past few weeks, they announced over here in the UK, as the certified refurbished licensing program expands out to the UK. They're working with SCC, which is one of the biggest, we call them a channel titan. They're one of the biggest IT resellers in the market, and obviously have been a partner of HP for a long time. Not as an ITAD necessarily, as a partner, a service provider. And SCC is a company that's got really ambitious goals to increase their take back. They've actually opened up a new facility in Birmingham within the last 12 months. They're actually and they're trying to use devices as a service as a real way to kind of close the loop and get more of that equipment back. But they now have this facility to handle refurbishment, and HP has selectively looked at them, not as necessarily, obviously they're functioning as an ITAD, but they are a reseller, they're a channel partner. So this has been quite an interesting moment, because it's kind of showing that a vendor can actually recognize. Yeah, it is. It's it sounds like a small thing. It's one example of a reseller that's other ITADs involved in the program, but it's a significant moment to see a vendor realizing that its longtime channel partner, its reseller, can actually not only take back equipment, but can refurbish it as well as the vendor could itself. And they're happy for them to sell it with that same branding, that same warranty. It's a real sign of optimism, and other vendors will definitely follow.
Point, right? Because one of the objections to remanufacturing, I suppose, is it's expensive. When you look at it and when you put it inside a vendor, I mean, Rich and I have got war stories about this, but the margin expectation when you're dealing with a vendor that makes new products can be mismatched with an expectation when you have a capital outlay for hardware that's already been in the market. In other words, you need to give value to get that asset back in. Otherwise, the asset owner is going to sell it to somebody else, likely, an independent ITAD. But what's really interesting is that you've got vendors like Cisco, like HP, like Juniper, who do have these remanufactured programs, but they're almost internally handcuffed because the portfolio's too deep, it's too old, the cost of keeping the line up, the throughputs, the fact that channel partners historically have only really wanted N-1 product and perhaps not a bit further back, doesn't mean there isn't demand. And I think what you're describing here with HP's new certified program is certified used, right? And I must have said this, 7 years ago. The outsourced model, which very much is the used car model, right? You can go and buy a Volkswagen from a garage down the road. You don't have to go to the Volkswagen main dealer. And that these guys are able to sell it as a certified used vehicle. It's the same with IT assets, provided the vendor gives access, and it can be limited, do it on products that are going or have gone end of sale as a first port, but, give access to the patches, give access to the test scripts, to the Pantone, to the screws that you need to use, that type of stuff, in order to to refurbish it to a standard. But it's the script really that's the key to it. and then sell it under a certified use. But the trick here that vendors seem to miss is that license isn't transferable. That license is a net new sale to you, and it's a net new sale to effectively a new customer, because the likelihood that second customer wasn't your first customer, it's a different profile, it's a different buying profile, as the third customer is different to the second customer. So I think it just kind of wanted to draw those conclusions, because we're seeing demand in the market. We're seeing, and certainly, with HP doing it, and I think they're doing it on the laptop. It's HPI that are doing it. What I'd really love to do would be to see that translate into enterprise equipment, and see vendors really begin to embrace the power of the circular economy, and that kind of that expansion of their customer base that would provide.
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely agree with that point there, Vic, about enterprise equipment as well. I think often when we're talking circular economy, we talk consumer devices. And I think that's where, some of the points you were mentioning earlier, Rich, around like sort of trade-in and, buying sort of used devices. These are concepts that people are familiar with from the consumer world. But there really is an opportunity to expand on this in a sort of enterprise environment as well. So let's say servers, all of that kind of equipment, networking equipment. There's a real capability there, and we see channel partners are also able to help here as well. Lots of channel partners will be partners of some of the big sort of infrastructure vendors out there, and they're capable of doing asset recovery, doing refurbishment as well for enterprise equipment. And as we've got this, especially when we're talking any sort of equipment that will be used in a data center. There's obviously a huge opportunity as that market expands to get more refurbished equipment there, or even remanufactured equipment as well, which can make sure you've got something that's kind of cutting edge and as good as new. So a real opportunity there as well to not just talk not just talk in terms of consumer devices, but also look at that enterprise side as well. Because I think sometimes in the world of circular, especially when it's on the legislation out there, like around right to repair or refurbished procurement. Often that focuses on consumer devices, which is great and hugely important. But to have a truly circular IT industry, got to make sure that we're talking all forms of IT hardware out there, not just your phones, your laptops, your keyboards, that type of thing.
Yeah, I'm going to go through and pre-bust a myth real quick, because this is a common thing. Vic mentioned customer 2, customer 3, and you've got to find ways to compel them to make a purchase. In reverse logistics, there's 3 primary goals that you have. Make sure you can identify the thing that came into the person that sent it to you, so you can go through and give them credit. Number 2, identifying both functional and cosmetics. So if I'm going through and I'm buying a used thing for my 15-year-old, I don't necessarily need it to look and feel like new. I want to make sure it works. So I want to make sure it's tested. If there's a 90-day warranty on it instead of a 2-year warranty on it, if the price point's low enough, that's good enough for me. And if it's got a scratch on it, he's going to scratch it anyway. So, or if I buy if I'm looking for yard tools or a server rack that I'm going to go through, take it, put it in a room and not look at it again for another 3 years. I don't really care that it looks pristine, but the cost to get things to like new standards oftentimes has it priced so close to new that you're missing the market with everything else that is taking place on a peer-to-peer platform, where you're getting into the shades of good, better, best. As time progresses, I'm willing to sacrifice cosmetic appearance. I want it to work.
Yes.
But I think that's the places that you can see. Some of the mobile carriers in the US have started going through and selling things in good, better, best condition to match the supply source, but that's for another podcast. But Ben, this has been a really fun talk. What I'd love to hear from you, the viewpoint that you have, because you talk to a lot of people, you've done a ton of great research, and you're clearly a brilliant person. We love to ask in this podcast, what is something that you see as a common misperception that you're able to go through and myth bust?
Sure. So thanks, Rich. Thanks for the kind words there. So I did some thinking about this before, and there's a few myths, but the one I really wanted to talk about today, when we're talking circularity, often we're talking hardware. It's really, really crucial that we remember that operating system support and software is a huge part of a circular economy. I think there's often an assumption that, it's all about hardware, it's all about refurbishment. You can repair something, spare parts, etc. But especially when we're talking in the sort of, the commercial market, commercial customers, it's really, really important that the devices they're using are getting operating system updates, and really important that they're getting security patches as well. And the reason that this is something that's particularly, the myth I'm choosing today, we at Canalys spend so much time talking to channel partners about sustainability and what holds them back in terms of the circular economy and shifting towards the refurbished market. And right now, one of the biggest issues that we've been seeing over the past couple of years is the end of support for Windows 10. So that comes up in October, so really not long away. There's so many devices out there. So we actually published some research on this about 18 months ago, basically saying that due to the end of support for Windows 10, 214 million PCs will end up in landfill, which is a pretty horrific figure, especially when you think about all of the progress that's being made. And when I talk about, what channel partners are doing in terms of capabilities to refurbish devices. And the problem here is, if you're, let's say you're a consumer, a lot of consumers are kind of happy. They might take the risk. Let's say you use your laptop once a week to send a few emails or check Facebook or something like that. Maybe those consumers can take the risk of using an unsupported operating system, and they'll just close the pesky notifications about Windows 11 support, and they'll just move on. But for businesses, they really, really cannot afford to do that. And that's true for enterprises, and also, large enterprises, and also those small, medium businesses as well. Because from a cybersecurity point of view, they are just not going to take the chance of using an unsupported operating system. And, we've all seen various kind of horror stories about when, years ago, there was a massive issue with the NHS here in the UK, huge ransomware problem. And a huge part of that was that they were using really, really outdated form of Windows. And one of the key problems here is that it costs a lot of money to upgrade to Windows 11. You can extend. You can, obviously, Microsoft wants you to buy a new device, and some of the vendors want you to buy a new device as well. But if you've got a device that's, let's say, not compatible with Windows 11 and in a really good condition hardware wise, or even been refurbished, you're going to be charged quite a lot of money by Microsoft as a business customer to get an extra 1, 2, 3 years of support. I think it's something like $457 if you were to get the 3 years of extended operating system support. And for businesses, it's just not viable. So they can have devices that are perfectly good, that have been, maybe used for quite a few years, but still have a few years left in them. They absolutely could keep getting used. But if Microsoft is not willing to support them in an affordable way, then it's going to end up in landfill. And there's, even when we talk about refurbishment, it's kind of give it a few years' time. There's really not going to be a lot of appeal for a Windows 11 for a Windows 10 device. That's regardless of how good the refurbishment quality is. If it's not a legitimate and supported, secure operating system, businesses are not going to take the risk. And I won't go too deep into it, but there's some really interesting kind of opportunities here for, Google has made quite an interesting effort to kind of capitalize on this problem that Microsoft's got with e-waste, where they're kind of marketing their Chrome OS Flex, which is basically you can turn your Windows PC into a Chromebook, and you get extended security support, and they frame it as a big environmental thing. Or if you're up to it, you can try Linux, but a lot of businesses are not quite ready for that. So that is my my myth to bust.
Quite clever from Google, right?
Yes, it really is. Yeah, they've been quite. I think they've been quite strategic in sort of seeing this opportunity with the Windows 10 and 11 refresh. It's kind of a way to really kind of get some uptake on Chrome OS. And I think the big question is, there's been a lot of we all remember the refresh over to Windows 10. I think it was from 8. And now we're sort of looking ahead. Now people are talking about the environmental side of things. I mean, I'm certainly making a lot of noise about it, and happy to speak about this topic. It's a real passion project, but there's also some great companies out there that's kind of support the right to repair movement, or for instance, there's the Public Interest Research Group. There's some great guys there that are doing some good work to raise awareness of this massive e-waste problem that Microsoft is kind of creating. But the big question is, what next? What do we do with Windows 12? Are we going to let this happen again? Is the industry going to let this happen again? Because it's a huge e-waste problem every time.
what would be very interesting is and it's such a fun puzzle to think about, even though it's the scary puzzle to think about. If you have the disintermediation between hardware makers who are trying to sell more machines by making better quality, and then you have software that goes through and makes those machines work. If there's a disconnect between the longevity of the hardware and the longevity of the software that goes to support it, if you have a Google Chrome OS that starts matriculating into the 10 users that have no other option, and they get people used to their operating system, you have this growing pool of people who become Google customers. And then you start having one of your competitors get strong enough to fight you where you're strong, because they're taking advantage of a hole or greed a little bit. $450 to go through and upgrade a machine that's worth $2 doesn't make any sense at all. But if there's money to be made, people are going to find it. So for me, this one's been a fascinating thought process and journey. And Ben, I've really appreciated the time. Vic, would you like to close this out?
Yeah, absolutely. Ben, thank you so much. I think we can all learn from analysts and market research firms like Canalys, because, what you do is you bring multiple viewpoints together, and, you're able to deliver the key points to, to people like ourselves, people like the consumers, as to, what the trends are, what the behaviors are, and, and where we should be looking. So thank you for that. You've been a great guest. Wonderful. Thank you for giving us your time. This has been your episode of All Things Circular. I'm Vic D'Arcy.
And I'm Rich Bulger.
Talk to you again next time.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Yep.
Thanks for tuning in. Please head over to allthingscircular.com to learn more.